Oh, hello there, Internet. Welcome to another Wednesday serial. And while you're all out there reading your fancy new comics, I thought I'd take some time and look back at a different era, a different time. A time when things were a little more rambunctious in the comics world. A time when things could flow. A time when things were a little more linked to video games. I want to talk about Acclaim Comics, Quantum and Woody. Yeah, right. Quantum and Woody. You might not remember it. Probably don't. A lot don't. Yeah, you'll notice my number one, all bagged and boarded. Unlike the frickin' rest. Was a moment in comics history, I like to think, known for being the world's worst superhero team. It was a buddy book, which you don't get enough of anymore. And the kind of thrust behind it was to have a superhero pair where they were also supposed to be a comedy duo, and Christopher Priest, who did the art with MD Bright, basically wanted to have one where the white guy was more of the sidekick and more of the comic relief and the goof off, and the black guy, Quantum, was more of the straight man. And so you see that come up a bunch of times. They play with a little reversal, and they spend a little too much time with a body swap throughout what they were able to put out. So, yeah. So to sum it up, you have these two kids who were pretty much in a well-to-do neighborhood, and therefore a kind of white-to-do neighborhood. And you had Eric, and then you had Woody. Now, Woody was always mouthing off and doing whatever and kind of being a jerk off, whatever. And Eric and him were friends for a long time, and then Woody kind of pushed it, and as you find out more, you understand why Woody didn't have the same life, more on the streets, whatever. And Eric was always doing the best, and you see a lot of this when they do the body swap. It really becomes apparent. Eric's working out all the time, striving to be better, reading, trying to get ahead, doing all the right things, being a really straightforward, good guy. And Woody just kind of sleeps until noon, does whatever, just kind of jerks off, and things kind of work out for him. And so they come across something, and their parents were part of this company that have these bands, these quantum mechanic bands that bind, and Eric finds out that they need to keep them together. They need to clang them together once every so many hours, and they say that they need to do it once a day just to be safe. And from them, Quantum's able to shoot out these pushing, like Cyclops' blast. He's able to push things away and do whatnot. And Woody's able to use a heat ray, or maybe I mix those up. But they're just able to shoot rays, whatever. It's kind of their superpower from tech. And it just kind of goes from there, but it really focuses more on their lives. In fact, this first issue has no superheroics or anything whatsoever. When they decide to become the team, Eric dubs himself Quantum to have a superhero name. Woody's like, I'm Woody, whatever, call me Woody. But the series goes forward, and they start doing some things. One thing that really threw me off, and if you ever read a random issue, one thing to know, because they use this throughout, is they talk about the N-word and how it's offensive and terrible, but it's something used and whatnot. So they say noogie instead. So every time you hear noogie, you know what they're talking about. And they really play off of that in weird ways. And in the one extra issue, Goat, or Heavily Armored Espionage Deadly Uber Sheep, you get a weird aside to one of the longest running arcs in the book. But in it, we see a little bit that touches on the comedy. And you have it here, and they talk about how Quantum and Woody's a funny book, and you should be picking it up, and it's from Acclaim, yada yada. And they have it here. Funny, Giffen's Justice League, not funny. Morrison's Justice League. Funny, The Goat, not funny. Lockjaw. Funny, Gru, not funny. Peter David, though he looks like Gru. Funny, Quantum Woody 4, not funny. Quantum Woody 5, alright, we admit it. Funny, Wade's Impulse, not funny. $90 for 12 new KC pages. Funny, Peter Magnus, not funny. VHI Magnus, back in the day. Funny, Power Man Iron Fist, not funny. Heroes for Hire. Funny, Troublemakers, the Acclaim book, not funny. Speedball. Like, I don't know, they just have this like list and they're talking about, and they're like, we have a goat, it's funny, and there's like this very like weird sense of humor that they try to hit the entire time. What's really funny about it is they have some decent jokes in here. They also have some really, like, you could tell they're trying to hammer in the joke, and it just does not deliver. A great example of this is in one of the first issues. There's a 9-frame panel where Quantum leaps off the building and does a few flips and lands in the car. And then Woody's running down the stairs, so there's just 3 panels of Quantum waiting as Woody's going, and then lands, and then finally shows up to the car, and Quantum's like, "Oh, you're here!" Like, it's funny the first time. Then they use that joke like 3 more times throughout the series and actually kind of make it a moment that they play off of. It's kind of weird, and it's a joke that's funny once as a visual gag, but to take up an entire page with a repeat gag is not really how repeat jokes are supposed to work, because the idea is to have a line to tie you to the joke and just move it quickly. But while Quantum Woody was part of this Acclaim Comics, which was really Valiant Comics, Acclaim had bought Valiant, and then how Valiant got free of all those shackles and whatnot, was able to reprint now, I don't know that story. But at the time, they're also trying to push some other stuff. The one that Quantum Woody ran into the most were the Troublemakers, which I think was just part of Acclaim Comics and haven't really been seen since. It was a bizarre little moment, and they were trying to play a lot of different angles with comics, and this was back in the day. I mean, this was 98. This is right before the bubble really burst, and comics were selling like hotcakes, and they were kind of able to get away with it. But then the bubble kind of caught up, and pretty much right after they finished this back and forth, they relaunched. Or not they relaunched, they stopped. And they did so right after this kid's sidekick was killed, and it was this really heavy arc, and it was clearly leading to where the book was finally trying to get going. And that was 17 issues in, so it's not like they didn't have a run, but by that day's standards, that was pretty quick, and by today's standards, they probably should have tried to move the book further along, and I don't think the first few issues would have caught on. I don't think it would have sold at all. It was definitely a product of the time, and Christopher Priest was definitely playing with that in doing weird ways, and he was very much a student of like this Marvel comic churning out mentality of the 90s, and was part of a lot of stuff going on with Jim Shooter at Marvel Studios at the time, which some people respected and some people hated because they looked at it as slave driving. But anyways, after that, Priest was hired back to Marvel to write probably one of the most notable and yet now forgotten Black Panther runs throughout the 90s, and I think he's had pretty much the longest run with the character. It was 60 some odd issues of just him writing it straight. And I don't think that's been done with that character really before or since. Maybe I'm wrong. If so, please correct me. But he was told to write it in the manner that he wrote Quantum and Woody, which was kind of playing off of this Seinfeld idea of when you want to switch scenes, you kind of have a little... not Seinfeld, Frasier. And also trying to play it so that there was some perspective switches, and he added a lot more to that Black Panther run, which was really his greatest creative work in so many ways, despite the fact that he kind of resented being the black guy told to write a black character, but he really did some things there before that was kind of the curse that led him to leaving comics. But during his Black Panther run, he was told to come back to Quantum and Woody because for whatever happened with Acclaim Comics, they drummed up some money, were able to start trying to crank it out again. And so for 4 issues, they were back. And they kind of just picked up where they left off. And then he made sure to make fun of himself, did the Stark Kitty in lieu of Black Panther and all this. And then, you know, just as they were starting to get going again, they ended it with the characters pretty much at odds with each other, but kind of getting past each other. I don't know, and also hitting a weird 90s vibe. And that was it. And then a while later, Acclaim had one last trick up their sleeve, and they knew this was it, but I think they wanted to do this. So it ended on issue 21. So literally a year later, they picked up for all their series what would have been that issue, in Quantum Woody's case, issue 32, part 3 of 4, Eclipse. And it's this really weird thing where it's like, what had happened? You find out that one of the main characters died and the other guy was dealing with it, and there was this new sidekick and all this crazy stuff had gone on. And it was like, the book finally was able to go and became this book that it was leading to being after relaunching already again. And it was just this weird... This is a weird artifact. I don't know of any other company doing that or being able to do that, where a year later they pretend like they'd been going for a year and then publish. So there's supposedly this span of what would have been a good percentage of what would have been Quantum Woody comics that were never printed. So it was an interesting run, and it was a time when, I mean, the closest comic to this that ever really came out was when they were doing Cable and Deadpool, and they had that buddy dichotomy. Humor was a big part of it. And what's really funny, too, is Fabian Nitschke was really big at Acclaim Comics, and Troublemakers was his book and all that. And his humor and all that was a big thing, and he was the one trying to show Christopher Priest how to put that into the book better and how to be a bit of a better writer. And they have a lot of jokes about him, like I said, in the book. And then Cable and Deadpool comes out and really just does it so much better. Also able to play with the tools of the Marvel Universe, so some things just ring truer. And you have more tools to play with. But yeah, it's interesting for being that sort of buddy superhero team that just does not exist depending on the time in comics history. And part of the reason I bring it up right now is that, let's see here, they're set to relaunch with Valiant, and apparently the entire run's out on Comixology. I would highly recommend you to just go find the issues. I'm pretty sure they're like $1 a piece on most sites if they have them. And then James Asmus is supposed to be writing it, which is worrisome because he's really only done Gambit, which was not worth picking up. And he's done some of the writing for Thief of Thieves, which I'm still picking up, but he's clearly only doing so much, so I don't know. Maybe he has the comedic chops, but nowhere in his prior writing is it to be seen with that. The art is to be done by Tom Fowler, who's had some time with DC and then a few property comics, but I don't think I own an issue of his work. And I'm really trepidatious about this relaunch. I can tell you, if I was reading Quantum and Woody back in the day, from the way it was paced and ran, I wouldn't have enjoyed it, and I would have dropped it as a monthly comic, especially given that back in the day, right? Let's see how much an issue was going for. $2.50 back in the day. Now I'd be a little more okay with it, but some of their specials were like $3.95. Back then, whoa. And I don't think that this is a property that really needed to be reinvigorated, and I find it funny that I know Priest was trying to get this book back up and running, but to have someone else on it, especially someone fairly unproven, I find it odd that they're doing. And I'm really curious to see how it goes. Also, I'm not picking up any Valiant Comics right now because they are not worth the money that they charge for them for the most part. I know some people love them, and that's great. I don't think they're better than certain other things. Like this week, you could pick up The Movement, 10 grand, Hawkeye and Green Arrow, like I did, all for $2.99 a piece. So I don't know. I don't think any of those Valiant comics are $1 better than any of those comics. So, yeah. But hopefully you all will go back and maybe check out some Quantum and Woody. There's some crazy stuff and there's some weird jokes. And a body swap story that has more relevance than the Superior Spider-Man. A lot of weird things to throw in there, but there you go. So yeah, hope y'all have a happy Wednesday, and I'll hit you soon with another comic review.